Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And we are continuing on with our series on creating New Earth, a collaborative mission. And today we have Elena Bensonoff, and she's the founder of Wholistic Incorporated and a pioneer in the field of functional, regenerative, and energy medicine. She's been sharing her gift of healing for over 20 years. Elena began her journey as a clinical pharmacist and experienced a profound awakening to the power of holistic treatments during her battle with chronic debilitating asthma. She's now symptom-free, and she now blends the worlds of cutting-edge medical research and time-tested ancient healing modalities. She uses her revolutionary methods and talents to serve, empower, and protect others in need of healing. Her mission is to put an end to chronic illness by providing her students and clients with practical solutions for cultivating long-term health and wellness. Elena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And audience, friends, you're excited to know that Alejandro, her husband, is going to be joining us as well midway throughout this episode. So please stay tuned for that as well.
Elena, I am fascinated that you're sort of catapult into looking into more of a holistic style of medicine was through your struggle with asthma. That was exactly mine growing up too. I was a total bubble boy growing up, and I remember seeing the allergist and they said, "You're the worst kid I've seen in 15 years of practice. It's like everything's swelled up." I'd end up in the hospital at times in the oxygen tent for asthma and having a Ventolin mask and all these types of things. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I actually started to explore. And that's actually what got me into becoming a naturopathic doctor and osteopath and all this sort of new world of medicine that was not even in my viewpoint until the struggles actually opened up to find solutions around it. But I'd love to hear just your background story around your experience with that and how that opened up a new way of looking at health.
So I would say that perhaps we should start where I was as a child. I was a very sick child. I did grow up in the former Soviet Union in Ukraine, Kiev, Ukraine. The interesting thing about the medical system where I grew up, it was very open-minded. So I grew up surrounded by physicians. My aunt was a pediatrician. She was my pediatrician. My grandmother was a dentist. My great-grandfather was a surgeon. So there was a lot of medicine around me. And there was always an ulterior way of looking at things. So I was not the vaccinated child, which is very interesting and unusual. My aunt was definitely not a believer in the vaccines in the Soviet times. And whenever I had ear infections, which I had a lot of them as a child, she would say, "We're not putting her on antibiotics." So thanks to her and my parents, I was not really kind of poisoned. I wasn't really poisoned by the antibiotics until we had to come to the United States. And this is where I had to get over 20 vaccines in one day. As part of the entrance into this country. And then this is where I would say my health began to decline in many ways. But I knew I wanted to go into medicine. I just didn't think I wanted to go into medical school, even though my grandmother was pushing me to go to dental school. My aunt was like, "Oh, you need to go into medical school." I just felt, well, I wanted something much more, I would say, faster, but also cleaner. So I decided to go to pharmacy school with this idea of, I can create potions and save people's lives. So quickly after graduating, I realized that our medical system in the United States is pretty kind of poisoned by the big pharma. And the medications, the amount of medications that patients were on when I started working just blew my mind, because I worked in a diabetes clinic, and the average amount of scripts a patient would be on was between 17 and 20 meds a day, which is really just shocking, right? I don't think any other country in the world over-medicates people in that way. And there was no conversation about, diet, how diet plays a role in inflammation. But then, of course, I became sick as well. And quickly had to realize I needed to change my diet. And it's fascinating, actually, because we just came back from Bosnia, and most people who travel overseas realize that the food is not sprayed, right? It's a lot less sprayed. Bosnia does not spray their crops. There's no chemtrails there. There's no GMO. So things that I could eat, let's say when I go to Bosnia, or perhaps even France, are very different than the things I could eat in the United States. And this is the pattern I also learned and realized with a lot of my patients.
Yeah.
That, for example, if they couldn't have gluten, they can go to Paris and they can have gluten. And then I was like, well, maybe it's not a gluten sensitivity, it's the glyphosate and all the other chemicals that are being sprayed in the crop. So yes, for me, it was that connection of how diet really plays a role in inflammatory processes and the chronic conditions that we have. So I had to change my diet, my lifestyle. And also my oldest son at that time was very sick with severe eczema from head to toe. He was an infant and he had severe rash all over his body. And the things that they recommended to us was prednisone. Eventually, as he got older, he also became really sick. About a year ago, we had an incident. I don't know if you guys have followed us, but we can talk about that too.
Yeah, it's actually really fascinating. I found the same thing with many of my patients over the years too. They're like, I'd go to Italy and I could eat pasta and I could have all of these things, but literally as soon as I got back home, it all started to come back again. And a lot of people don't realize that regulations are actually quite different in different places in the world. And a lot of times we think that, North America has it all kind of figured out in many ways. In many ways, they're the worst for the regulations on a lot of those types of things.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it's kind of been set up that way because so many other, third world countries are looking up to the States and the Americas. They're actually changing their lifestyle in order to become more Americanized because they think that's more prestigious, that's more leading edge, that's cooler, as many of my cousins did when we were growing up. So it's actually encouraging them to give up all these. I grew up with opening up my grandmother's medicine cabinet. It was in her kitchen, throughout all her cabinets within her kitchen. And it was all jars of herbs that she would dry. Or you go to the bazaar, to the market in the Middle East, and they're just, all it is basically herbs being sold in form of knowing that it's going to heal some, whether it be a tummy ache or a headache or a colon cleanse or any sort of issue that you have, then it would be dealt with accordingly.
That's right. But yes, I would say a huge disconnect that we're facing right now in society. And that disconnection is between food industry and what we put in our mouth, what we purchase in the grocery stores, and how it affects our day-to-day life.
What do you find the biggest ones for people, and how do you get them to start to implement some of those changes? Because I always find that diet's like the trickiest part, and people are still relearning a new model of doing things. Because even in the health, even in the natural health industry, a lot of people still then just move from, rather than a pill, they want now a supplement pill. They want something else. So it's the same model, just using maybe something that's a bit more, quote unquote, natural rather than a medication. But often the mentality is still the same. Where do you find you start to get people to really embody making some of these bigger changes? Because changing the diet, for people that haven't done it, a lot of people don't until they just decide they're going to. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I would say that usually people that will reach out to me are the ones that have not been feeling well for quite some time. And it is about having customized, precise protocols that are needed at this time. We're moving towards, I would say the medicine is moving towards testing people for what they need, not a generic diet. I don't believe in any diets. I believe it has to be ideal for that particular person, and that can change whether it's in a month or 6 months. So depending on what the person needs, I would say generically, I get people off of alcohol. That's one of the top things. Sugar, dairy. Those are the top three. Many people are also sensitive to nightshades. And I find that there is a difference in nightshades. What people don't realize with nightshades is that it can actually impact you for 6 months. If you eat something, it will stay in your system for 6 months. So that's a big one for people. And there is a difference in nightshades, those that grow above ground and in the ground. And usually people tend to react to those that are the solanine family that are above the ground, right? The tomatoes, the eggplant, and things like that. So those are the most common ones, sometimes gluten. And then any kind of baked goods would be another one to eliminate. But again, corn would be huge. So many people don't realize they're actually consuming products that contain corn and staying away from prepackaged foods. So it's all about reconnecting to actually cooking your own meals, which I think culturally in North America, somehow there is a big disconnect. If you travel around the world, you see people are actually making their meals. And initially, when I started doing my work and working with patients, I would ask them, how many times a week do you prepare your meal? And people would look at me and say, does takeout consider making a meal? Yes. And I'll say no. Just because you have a takeout and you put it in the microwave, which is a disaster too, it doesn't make it, to where you actually make your own meal. So it's about going back to basics, and it is hard. So some people will say to me, what do I eat?
Yeah.
Because there's such a disconnect. Like if you take away gluten and dairy, people have no idea what to eat. They'll say, or wine. They'll say, well, you just took away my conversation with my husband. I have no idea how to communicate.
Wow.
It's so
yeah.
like you find all of the other things that you're tethered to that you've attached to foods.
Yes.
So much of it ties in with our social life, and also we don't want it to ruffle the pattern. It's like when I would have kids that would come in, for example, with chronic ear infections or something, and one of the first things is usually need to pull dairy out and whatnot, because it tends to, even though a lot of times the ENT will tell you dairy is not related to inflammation. It's like, if you're a clinician and you're doing it, you will see over and over again that it almost always plays a big role in it, and it creates trouble. So at some point it's like, I don't know how you can't see the connection with it, but it gets a big struggle, because a lot of times they're like you said, well, what do I do if I take out gluten, I take out dairy? That's 90% of my child's diet. It's like, part of that is we need to relearn that. And I think even like from the get-go, from early on, one thing we did with our kids was early on, we would have them exposed to all the different tastes. We would give them specific things so that they knew what bitter tastes like. They knew what, sour tastes like, not just sweet and salty, which is the primary dominant ones here in North America. So, experiment with it. And if they start early, then they've developed a bit more of a sophisticated palate. And then you've got to eat that too as a parent. You have to change what you're eating. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, why are you doing this? And then telling me to do that. So it's a whole transition that I think ultimately family dynamics have to all kind of embark on together.
Absolutely, yes. And that's usually what happens if I have one family member change their diet, the spouse will absolutely have to do the same. And then they'll say, oh, my husband lost 20 plus pounds and his blood sugar dropped and he's feeling great.
Yeah, usually if they look better, or the intimacy level, or the sexual activity is there, it improves, or money situation, those three typically get people really motivated.
Well, for men particularly, I usually find it's like women are usually way ahead of the game than most of the men. They're usually bringing their kids in, and then they see the good results with their kids, and then they start to do it, and then they often a little more reluctantly eventually get the husband to come in. But I'll often joke, I say usually the husbands come in if it affects their ability to make money or have sex. Now it's become a really big deal. Prior to that, they're okay with kind of holding off. But no, big changes just by making those ones that you're talking about with diet alone.
Can you tell us, Elena, a little bit more about your book? What motivated you to write it? And can you tell us what main themes and topics you've had listed in there?
Yes. So this book has been, it took years to put together. So you guys have seen it. I wanted to put something simple together as a self-guided journey, which is Wholistic Wisdom, awakening your inner healer, to give people power or empower people to realize that if you don't have answers from your primary care doctor, right? Which what I'm finding right now for the last years is most of the patients are doing the research, they're much more aware, and they're coming in to see a lot of their medical providers, and they don't have the right answers, right? So they're looking, where do I get the right tools to figure out what I can do for myself? So Holistic Wisdom, Awakening Your Inner Healer is actually a toolkit for people to be able to test themselves what is happening in their system. So it's broken down into three parts: body, mind, and soul. The number one place I start with is the gut. What inflames the gut? and it's usually our diet. So there is a self-testing chart that I show and technique and how to test for top, I can't remember if it's 12, but top food sensitivities. So a person will be able to test their own food sensitivities without having to go and pay, I don't know, thousands of dollars and still not be sure, because oftentimes these tests are not exactly 100% accurate. And the testing that I'm teaching is very simple, and it's giving you ideas of what is happening to your system in the moment. Okay. Then part two, so we're also looking at adrenals. There's some ideas of herbs also that I give, which I think are important to help support if there is candida, fungus, leaky gut, all kinds of things like that, digestive enzymes and probiotics. Part two is all about the mind. And you can test to see which emotions are out of balance, which is important because our mind, our emotions impact our GI. There's this connection of brain and gut connection. So whenever the GI is inflamed, it's the chicken or the egg, which one comes first, right? So the person is able to test their own emotions. And then part three is going into the soul aspects, the sacred geometry. And there's tools that a person can use to also incorporate the sacred geometry into our physical reality, because what are we? The whole field of information is geometry and mathematics. So what I've discovered over time is this ancient cultures knew a lot about different geometrical patterns, right? And how they would impact our overall well-being. So people, by reading that book, will be able to learn a little more about sacred geometry and begin to incorporate it into their health and wellness.
It's fascinating, the whole area when you get into geometry. I really think that's like you want to get right down to the core of it. I think that's where you really start to see the magic happen. I talked about this before, but one of the guests on our show, Ralph Sudeth, who's done some like brilliant work with water and with the memory stored in water and how we can actually literally clean that out and then reinstill sacred geometry back into water again too, and structure the water in a whole different way. He was talking about as the GIs, he would talk about it from the water. He said the vortexing is literally like the breath that the water takes, and then it's the geometry that it's exposed to, which actually traps and holds the light energy into it. And it's really quite fascinating. Then you just extrapolate that into how that affects us, and our body's mostly water, and you can go in that whole sort of realm, and you start to see, it starts to you get a knowing that makes sense. It feels right. And then try it out in your body. It's like you were talking about with even the diet, when you're self-testing. I totally agree. There's no one diet. And sometimes if people really resonate with something, probably like explore it, but know that it can change. No diet is meant forever. Your body's constantly changing, and be open to shifting and exploring. But what I'm really curious about now for people is I want people to know themselves. So it's like, even if I'm helping them and helping to guide that a little bit, I want them to reestablish that connection with their body so that they start to know again for themselves, right? This is a part of, I think, what these models that are shifting. It's like, when I think of a conventional model of what healthcare has been like, it's very much based on symptoms, not really based on health or healing, not wellness. And it's very much outside of your locus control versus inside your locus of control. So, or responsibility. So it's like we're constantly sort of outsourcing as opposed to trying to find it from within. Now, you've talked about in your book around really igniting that natural ability to heal. What do you find from your perspective in this? What are sort of the largest blocks that get in the way of that natural healing ability? And what's possible when that starts to get opened back up?
I would say limiting beliefs, as you just mentioned. Years ago, I've had people come to me and say, so-and-so has suggested that you can heal me. I'm here so you can heal me. And that is the belief system that you put your medical provider in this God platform, and you give your responsibility away. And I also often talk about that it's not your medical provider. It is not the pill. It is not anything external that is going to support the healing journey, right? That is going to heal you. We're all, whoever you hire on your path, are all there to kind of give you the information, but ultimately it's about you taking the full responsibility for yourself, which can be a challenge for many people. So it is shifting your belief system from an external into an internal, into your innerscapes. What are your belief systems in regards to your healing journey?
Mm-hmm. You guys just did a retreat out in Bosnia. I'd love to hear a little bit about that and how even the experience of maybe stepping right outside of what you know to be familiar and being immersed in something very different. What are people being exposed to in an experience like that that's opening up and helping to unlock that natural healing ability?
I wonder if this is the point where we can ask Alejandro to join us.
Yes, why not?
Welcome, Alejandro.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
being-
honored that you asked and that you're willing to take a risk.
We're
This
really
magnitude.
On the show.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, we were wondering if you could share a little bit more about the trip that you guys recently led to Bosnia.
Mhm. Yes, well, it was better than expected, I would say. Although we already had experienced it last year, this time it was a little different because of we took a group of people with us, and it was our first experience taking people, and of course, managing and directing and coordinating and making sure that everything is in line and everyone is taken care of. It was a whole new experience, but yeah, it was a beautiful experience, really. And I will say that having to interact with different people with different personalities, but all showing up with a common purpose, which is to experience higher levels of consciousness and to really be as present as possible. It was a beautiful thing to witness and to experience. So that enhanced the whole journey in Bosnia.
And people also left and said to us, like now we're receiving messages and people are writing reviews and they're saying, wow, I didn't know what to expect. We just wanted to be with you guys. And they have experienced such a drastic difference also as far as healing because of the food quality, the air quality, the water quality, which is incredible. It's purely structured water that we were drinking on daily basis, non-GMO food, which is absolutely foreign, I will say, in North America and many other countries around the world. So absolutely. And then we went into the tunnels to meditate. And yeah, like we've had one couple that came and she's very open and her husband wasn't sure. And she said, I just want my husband to feel, I want him to open up. And then, of course, things started flowing for him. She's like, oh my God, this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to be open and to feel things. And he did feel things. And this is just such a beautiful example of, we talked about a little earlier that women are the ones that usually will stay open and then they bring their spouses along. And then when the spouse experiences it, it's such a beautiful experience for everyone, right? Not just for that couple, but for everyone involved in the group.
I think what's so beautiful about this time, it's almost as if, it's not just these individual choices that we're making that is untouched by anyone around us, but it feels like almost as if when we are charging ahead and stepping forward with courage or fear, joy or despair, like whatever path we're choosing, we're almost reinforcing this template that then gets strengthened for everyone else around us. And it almost has this ripple effect. So I feel like that's what it feels like for me personally, when I am faced with any sort of trials or challenges. It's like, if I cower down and I opt for, if I choose, or if I'm considering even the easier route that might not ruffle any feathers or might not be stepping into the knowing of what I think is possible, then I remind myself, this is setting the template. This is setting the template. So if not for me, let me step up for my children, my family, my community, our world, the future of our planet. And then that usually just ignites this sense of, bravery within me that I had perhaps shied away from. And it definitely feels that way. It feels like even these trips that we're embarking on, where we're stepping away from the comfort of our home, our families, then we're opening up to much vaster possibilities that then open up to us. And then as we step forward, it's like, okay, then it makes it easier for the next person and the next person to also like, okay, I can do this too.
Somebody wrote to us actually as one of the testimonials that they understood what it actually felt like to experience the 5D community. Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what you're talking about, is creating this new kind of structure for the possibility of what many of us are envisioning. And it is through those sacred gatherings for people from different backgrounds, different places around the world. I think we had people from at least 7 or 8 different countries that joined us, to have different backgrounds, different languages, but have a common goal of wanting to raise the collective consciousness and contribute to it in a beautiful way. So yes, it is through those trips, and then bringing it back home and shining that light in your own life, in your community, with your family, is definitely a way to create the new earth.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they actually have a tangible experience. I think that's what's so important right now. It's like we can contemplate things and think about it and analyze it, but it's like we have to have a direct experience, because that's really where the shift in consciousness takes place. It's through the feeling sense of actually having that experience, and then knowing, because then regardless of what somebody else tells you, because you've had that personal experience. So I feel like this is where we're stepping in more and more to. It's less of, this still has its place for certain things, the brain and analyzing and stuff, but I think a lot less than what it has in the past. And now I think we're needing to have these direct experiences. So something like that gives somebody that feeling, and now they've stepped into that. It's like if you step into that state of consciousness, it makes me think of like maybe we'll segue into this after, but the fields of consciousness and Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness and how he looked at that. It's like, that's the lens you see everything through. So as soon as you move from one field of consciousness, say you were hovering in a place of fear, and then all of a sudden you moved and got catapulted to a place of courage, or acceptance or enthusiasm or something, you see the whole world anew. Everything changes just from that state of consciousness within yourself. Now, one thing I'd love to learn a bit more about from the work that you guys are doing is we had watched some of the work that you had done with Sasha Stone before, with the scale of consciousness and the scalar energy, and being able to sort of measure in different ways levels of consciousness. I'd love to just hear what you guys are doing with that and where that's being expanded upon what it once was.
All right. So just to give credit to Dr. Hawkins, who laid a beautiful foundation many, many years ago, 1980s, I believe. He inspired so many people to go deeper and search and look at the nature of reality. So we were inspired by that work, absolutely. But we've completely shifted out of, we don't ever use muscle testing, by the way, to test. We use scalar wave technology. And we also realized years ago when we started doing this work is we're not that one number that he talked about, that everyone has just that one number. We've tested now, I don't know, thousands and thousands of people at this point, private clients, public figures, and we've recognized that our numbers shift depending on where we are in our life, because we've been looking at people's lifetime. From the moment of incarnation to the moment of birth, most human beings have a frequency drop. And then we look at 36 different categories. So we can talk somewhat about these categories. But what we've done also, we look at emotions, but we've decided to break down the scale into 4 major aspects. The scale is not linear, and that's a big shift, right? And I always say that science is all about evolution, right? We wouldn't be scientists and going into quantum physics realm if we were just looking at the Newtonian type of physics, right? So that was the base, but we realized time is not linear. Our reality is not linear. Everything is fractal. This is why you see the nesting dolls behind me. That is one of the examples that we actually use, because it's sort of like awareness builds on awareness, right? So the four major aspects are the aspects of victimization. That's your level of consciousness of victimization. And that is 0 to 199 frequency. And then activation is from 200 to 499. And then we have illumination. Illumination goes from 500.
Inspiration.
Oh, sorry. Inspiration from 500 to 699. And illumination goes from 700 to 999. The 1000 frequency, which is the ceiling for human experience, is what we call the inner or divine essence. It's the pure form that exists absolutely in every sentient being. In fact, regardless of whether somebody is playing a shadow role or a light, it exists in all things. And this is why it is not a linear scale. It's a fractal scale that builds on everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing with our work? We're still testing everything because we want to know the truth. We want to get to explore and expand on the nature of our reality. And it is also through the collaboration with our community. When they say to us, Elena, have you looked at this? Or Alejandro, please check this. It opens our own, I would say, desire to explore further and then share the information with the community. So we try to stay on topics that are trending to also give insights to people of what is, because oftentimes, we're bombarded by so much information, whether it's alternative media or just media that people consume through television, radio, online, internet. How do you decipher what is true and what is not true? So we're looking into the ultimate truth with the best possible lens that we are aware of.
And I would say that it began with what is truth, actually, right? And we thought we were searching for the one truth to show people this is truth and this is not. But then we realized that truth is relative, right? And that really my truth doesn't have to be your truth or her truth. And so when we started measuring integrity per se, integrity, overall integrity, which is how loyal and faithful the person is to their truth, right? What they have accepted as truth. And we measure integrity to self and integrity to others. Then we really, by looking at the rest of the numbers and frequencies, we realized that a person that vibrates at extremely low frequency, let's say 25, and was born at 25, incarnated at 25, and overall, all the frequencies throughout his or her chart is 25, that person could also have 100% in integrity, because it's all about how faithful and loyal you are to your own truth, right? So what we now are trying to share is that what we must seek is not what is true, what is false, or what is negative, what is positive, what is right, what is wrong, but actually the ultimate truth. And for everyone is different. And the ultimate truth is that which it inspires you, it empowers you to accelerate your spiritual growth, to really to where you are bathing for a longer period of time, more often than yesterday or a year ago, in that inner essence, that avatar energy that we all carry, So it has been evolving as we measure different things in people, especially. We have been learning and expanding our horizons and our the lens in which we look at the world and the reality that we're experiencing.
Yes. And also what we realize through these measurements is there's no good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Every single human being on this planet matters, because we all contribute ultimately to the creation itself, because the consciousness and the creation itself is expanding and learning through every single puzzle piece on this planet.
Yes, and we all, based on our experiences, as you mentioned earlier, is that as we experience, we are emitting that information is being transferred, right, to the source, to the universal etheric library per se, and we are reinforcing, as you mentioned, that which someone else is seeking for, right? So those that are seeking rather a frequency of to experience something at the frequency of 50, or those that are seeking to experience something at the frequency of 700, have the ability to access whatever it is they want to experience. So the more we all experience, and in this case, as you and us, we are focusing on experiencing higher levels of consciousness, or expanding and focusing on personal growth, then therefore we're contributing that type of information that those that are seeking to experience high levels of consciousness will have the ability to access, right? It will be easier since we're having more and more people to focus our attention to that particular frequency. Yes, they could be translated in different ways because we'll experience it differently, right?
This is really fascinating, and it kind of leads us to the conversations that we've had with, Guide Needler, RJ Spina, Giulio Consiglio. So on a metaphysical level, what they had spoken about is the greater reality definitely has, for lack of a better word, a hierarchy, but it's set up in a way that, we are fractals of our higher selves, and our higher selves, how RJ Spina speaks of it, is kind of like an octopus sitting at whatever frequency that it's sitting on. And it just drops as a fractal, this would be a fractal of Thea, for example, in this time and space to have this particular experience. And at the same time that this experience is being gathered within this realm, right away, the higher self it's almost like a cloud, right?
Surprise.
It's like, right, a synthetic cloud as opposed to an organic way of knowing itself with greater capacity. And so even these higher selves that exist, so the higher self of the fractal of which I am a part of might be, different from the higher self and the frequency that Alejandro is sitting at, or Jason is sitting at. But collectively, all of us, whether it's we've chosen to play the part of the baddie in this lifetime, or the master, maybe the master might not be a good example, but a positive role in this lifetime, we're all aspects of God itself, fractals of God itself, having this experience. And it leads me to, do you have a question? Because I was going to ask them specifically about your experience with Sasha Stone, because there were some really wild episodes that I was tuning into. This is probably going back 3 years ago. Like, it blew my mind as far as what our reality is beyond what I've learned in school, beyond what I've heard through my family. You guys were actually looking at and calibrating different life forms like star nations beyond this physical realm. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit more about even some of the learnings that you've had based on the questions that were posed to you at that time.
You want to address it?
Well,
I know it's pretty broad.
Comes to celestial beings or aliens, however we want to call them, it was really something. It was new, really, for us. We were not thinking of measuring that. It came across to measure angelic beings, right? Because we're familiar.
We did an episode with that one too.
Yes. And I would say that as we were measuring different beings or galactic beings, that's really through that is that we learned and realized that it is definitely broader and more expanded and without limits somehow, and really pushed us to get out of the box completely, and so to where, oh my God, this really is fascinating and is blew my mind away, but how is this possible? And then we continue reading other beings, and it just started to make more sense. And I would say that the key has been for both of us. I can speak for her as well, because I've heard her say it before.
Yes.
Is that imagination paired with curiosity and the lack of judgment opens unlimited possibilities, and to where you are just really open to receive the information, and you're not judging it, you're not comparing it, therefore you're not limited to what you have experienced or what others have experienced. And believe me, it was not an easy thing to do, to start measuring people and go in public with that, and then to go into measuring celestial and galactic beings. That's like, oh my God, my family are gonna perform what do they call that, when they send a group of people that wake you up in the middle of the night and they take you to
Intervention.
intervention.
But you know what? I have to say though, going to Egypt this year, we went to Egypt with Mohammed. It was amazing. It completely solidified things that we were thinking and testing. It's right there on the walls. I mean, for people who have ever gone to Egypt, if you haven't been, it's a must at least once in your lifetime, because the Atlantis and the history of humanity, the human story, is written on the walls. It's impossible to ever go back after you've seen it and unseen it and unsee it, unknow it. So it's been a journey for us. Yeah. Was it easy? No. Initially, we didn't want to go public. That was like my biggest thing.
and also when Dr. Sam, the person who
founded the
Bosnian pyramids, when we went there last year, he asked us, can you measure a few things for me, please? And we said, yes, of course. Well, we're all excited. And then I asked, what would you like us to measure? Okay, well, let me think about it. So days go by and I'm thinking, okay,
we're going to leave soon.
We're going to leave soon. We need to know. And he said, okay, I just want to know when, why, how,
and who
built the pyramids. And
just that.
Just like that.
Is that it? And so after we said, with an open mind, let's sit down and see what comes and investigate. And well, at the end, we thought, okay, these are our findings, and we're gonna just share them with him. It is what it is, So he goes through and go, okay. I'm thinking he doesn't even look surprised, and I was a little worried because I didn't know what to expect. But he goes,
were you thinking of arranging an intervention for him?
Exactly. And he said, no, it makes sense. It makes total sense. I'm not surprised, and then he shared just recently we had dinner with him and a couple other people. It's last time over there. And he shared that he had consulted with psychics and
like
astrologers, and I don't know how many
remote viewers, and
yes.
Basically what we shared was pretty spot on. So that was
right. And he said, I am a scientist, so I always like to gather facts, but facts from many different sources, and I don't tell them or give them the details of what I'm looking for. Right? I don't expect anything, and I just let them share their findings, and that really was kind of comforting in a way, because we were right on in comparison to all the information that he
Which
received.
it's not even public what he discovered through psychics, but
Right.
our discoveries are public, so it's on YouTube. People can watch it.
Right. So it really is fascinating what one can access when you're open and
Curious.
allowing divine intelligence to flow, and just be okay with it, look at it and take it as is, without wanting to make it something else,
Mhm.
You know, I think that even reminds me of the way Dr. Hawkins would talk about how he would even do muscle testing, but I think there's a place where I think a lot of times it's hard for people to actually embody that, to be able to do it. But I think what you're saying allows for that space to get the truth to come in.
There's a neutrality.
There's a neutrality and no attachment to the outcome of it. And I think that's kind of at the core of it. How does the Scalar technology work? How did you guys come across that sort of technology and even be able to start to implement it?
Yeah, so initially it started off with me looking, because I use it for medical purposes. So initially it was due to a case, somebody that I've worked with who had Epstein-Barr. And after, let's say, working on this Epstein-Barr, it would come back, which in many cases, you probably know, Epstein-Barr can come back and flare up due to stress. So we decided to look into the field of this person and see what was the event and what were the emotions that were imprinted in that person's field, and look at their entire lifetime. So that's how it started. We started looking into the Epstein-Barr and what was the event. In that case, it happened to this woman when she was 2 years old, something she experienced, which we were able to pinpoint the emotion. And that is how the virus actually got imprinted in the field. So in a way, that particular virus, which is when we measured Epstein-Barr, actually it vibrated at a frequency of 400, which is fascinating because it's there to help us evolve, right? So we never did an episode on viruses, which we should do. It's information, right? Viruses are information. So in that case, this is what kind of led us to begin to investigate what it is that happens in a person's life, because we started looking at emotions. And then we began to use it and say, well, if we know the emotions, I wonder what that person vibrates at. So it takes two of us to do it. And one person cannot do this because it's two people sitting and doing their own thing.
Yeah, three instruments we use simultaneously. And
we do usually use a picture if it's an unknown person, right? So your photograph and your name will serve as an IP address, okay? And people actually recently, somebody said, well, how do you read public figures or people from history, like thousands of years ago? If it's a known figure, we don't need a photograph for it because the field, right? The biofield knows that. But if we're just reading a regular human being, we do need a photograph to know. The same way we would need a house picture to read the house frequency. We've read rooms, like people will send us a room and see, if rooms in the house are balanced, what are the frequencies of each room? So everything is information, and therefore it can be retrieved using scalar wave technology, and it takes two people to do it. Yes.
In a way, it's kind of like you're scanning, or you are just establishing the connection, right? And then you retrieve the information that you're wanting to, or you're seeking for. And often you receive more information than what you initially wanted to retrieve.
And people will say to us, how did you know this? No one knows this information. I even forgot about this information.
Because you open one door, and then because you open one door, since we are paying attention, we're in the now, in the present moment, without judging it, then just your own curiosity, imagination, and your creativity kick in, and then other things flow, right? As if someone is telling you, do this, do that, or try this, try that. And then one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden our puzzle is a never-ending, unending puzzle, because you open one door, you find one piece, and then that piece leads you to another piece. It's just truly fascinating, where one can not find out, but also retrieve. Yes.
Kudos to you for your curiosity, because I feel like when you have that and that sense of wonder, genuine curiosity with you, then it's like the sky's the limit. We were talking a few days ago about, if you're looking to fulfill a fruitful role as a politician, is it best to have prior experience, or is it not? And my view is that it's actually probably better not to have any experience as a politician, even though politicians who are, running for office like to wave the flag of, oh, I've been at this for decades, or what have you, because oftentimes when you're going into an environment with fresh eyes and genuinely with a sense of that curiosity that you're showing up with, then there isn't going to be too many attachments or biases, or you're not going to want to, you're not looking at one thing with the same lens that you have for, decades and decades, but you're genuinely there with fresh eyes to see and to evaluate and to learn. And I feel like because you're equipped with that, the both of you, then you can go in a person's, and scan the person's house or physiology or background and history, and really with fresh eyes look to see what's coming up, and again in a non-attached way.
Yes, definitely, I agree.
Have you guys looked as far as even humanity and where we are moving, as far as where we are on that sort of scale of consciousness, and what that's been like over the last 3 or 4 years, and where we are now? And I'd love to hear what you guys have found around that.
We have. We actually at least once a year try to release an episode that encompasses the whole year. In fact, I think this January of this year, 2023, we've released an episode of going month by month from a frequency perspective. But
we not only look at the overall number, but also we go through the whole chart as we do it for an individual, right? So we check
everything.
All the different
parameters, but collectively, yes.
But right before COVID, I don't remember exact number. We were definitely above 200 frequency, and then we've dropped
230.
Was it 230? Okay, and then we've dropped, and we were at 100, 125 last year. This is the year we're going more into 150. By the end of the year, we're supposed to be at 175. So we are overall collectively in this victimization mindset. And perhaps this is why many things are happening and coming up for so many of us to clear in our personal life. And it's not about pointing fingers. Oh, it's this group of people, it's because of them that we're in this situation. It's an invitation for all of us. When we see this frequency, it doesn't mean we're at that frequency, but I would say it is a mirror reflection of how important it is to look at, let's say, the unfulfilled desire or anger in your life. Like, how does anger show up for you? So maybe for some people, it is their reality day to day. For others who are in a higher frequency, it's probably not day to day, but because it's showing up collectively, it's important for all of us to begin to take responsibility for ourselves, our life. We talked about health earlier. So for every aspect of our life, it's important to see where the triggers are coming from and why are we even being triggered to begin with, right? And why do we point fingers at this group or that group? Because ultimately, we're one. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's triggering us, something is unresolved still within ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that was, even when you guys were explaining sort of the process of it, and, truth and relative versus absolute. And I remember Dr. Hawkins would talk about, you always have to look at content and context. And it's like context will always shift truth. It's depending on the context, what is perceived as being a not good thing all of a sudden switches completely depending on the context, and that's ever evolving, and I would say faster than ever at this point. Yes. And also the idea that if you're doing something that you feel is absolutely integrous and that's what you're being inspired to do, even if that's not at a level of consciousness that we would perceive as being beneficial, I think of that now as that might just be that role that specific person or soul is here to create, that might be also to facilitate the shift in other people. So it's like you can't get into goods and bads so easily. Even the scale of consciousness, I mean, even Dr. Hawkins said it's not better or worse, it's just fields of consciousness and where we are participating in what
And
experience.
actually, we've changed our
Exactly,
language.
yes.
We said that instead of calling people the shadow players, we're calling them the great awakeners, because people that are in those frequencies, lower frequencies, are here serving a very important purpose, and that is to help those that are choosing the light to rise. Without having that contrast, there would be no polarity. I mean, we're living in the universe of duality and polarity. So that is part of the game of being here on this planet. And it's interesting how some people say, once we raise the consciousness, then these lower vibrations will never be here. Well, that's just not part of our reality. It will never be. It's like walking into a room and wanting to experience full, range of colors. Well, how can you experience color if you're walking and it's all white? Right?
Absolutely.
And you're wanting just white light.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So there's
that
green,
conversation-
red, yellow, orange, and everything else in between.
Yeah, that's come up several different times with different guests over the past while too. Just that it's not just this beautiful place. I mean, it will be in certain aspects because I think you'll be able to access higher states within yourself, but that doesn't stop you from having the range of human experience. And like you said, you need all of that to keep growing and keep evolving anyways.
Yes, yes. And often we are too focused on freedom, but we forget that the ultimate is inner freedom, right? Which, in order to achieve that, we have to obliterate the attachments, right? Those that especially that we identify with the activating resistance. And with that inner freedom comes obviously lack of judgment. And when that happens, we can definitely collectively experience a new earth per se, right? Or a new world, or the famous 5D that everyone talks about. Because in the meantime, we are wanting to change the outer world and thinking that, oh yes, if we eliminate government, or if we get rid of the Fed, if we get rid of the politicians, or if we just move to
An island.
to the woods,
Off-grid.
off grid in the middle of nowhere, right? And we were not close, so we don't depend on any stores or any vendors or any manufacturers and any industries whatsoever, and we don't have to use money. We can just exchange goods and stuff. It sounds so beautiful, but if we get to do that now, while we're experiencing this level of consciousness or this frequency collectively, we might not have weapons to fight with against each other, but we're gonna cut a tree and hit ourselves with a piece of tree. One way or another, we're gonna find a way to express that what we're carrying, all the unresolved emotions, and that represent or signify the low vibrational frequencies that we're currently experiencing collectively. So it is extremely important that we know, and that's what we try to remind everyone. We're not teaching anyone anything new that they don't know about or they haven't heard of. We're just reminding everyone that the energy of I am of God is within them and everyone else and everyone, and that everyone has the ability to access it, right? And that we're all important and we're all unique, incompatible, and that it is all about changing the world within in order to have a total different and change our experience or how we experience the world around us. right?
Well, like when you said, Elena, just around even like we're at a level of consciousness, maybe there's a lot of anger coming up. To me, it's like use that as a reflection, use that as a mirror to kind of go back in and see where we can identify and clear that out within ourselves, right? Even
Yes.
with freedom, I think that's a big one right now. I think what's coming up with freedom is a reminder, like it's a mirror for us to go back in and unlock those within ourselves, because then I think we'll ultimately be able to create what we're feeling. But if we're not kind of going in and we're only focusing on out there again, it's the same problem. You know, RJ Spina said, you know, freedom is not being able to do anything you want whenever you want. It's removing the tyranny of the finite mind. That's real freedom. And so I feel like that's the reflection. Whatever's going on in consciousness, I think we can all use that to reflect back and see where we do that personally and go back inwards. So
Yeah, and there's so much fear too. Like we did an episode about 3D and 5D because there was a lot of things coming up that people in 3D are going to be left behind. And somebody said to us after we recorded it, oh my God, I've been anxious about it for the last couple of years because I thought that I'm going to be left behind. I'm like, no one is splitting, nobody's going behind. We're all part of the same thing. And it's unbelievable, like how there is this separation and fear that's also seeping in from many different, I would say, speakers around the world as well. They're contributing to it. So it's not about creating the fear, but how can we contribute to unity and support each other and have more compassion and empathy and understanding, and remember not to point fingers. You know, I think during this entire COVID process, that was a big lesson. You know, how many people were triggered? Oh, they're wearing a mask, they're bad, they're stupid, you know, calling names. Like, this is unacceptable. And, you know, what are those people thought about us who weren't doing this, right? The same thing. And we weren't thinking on the same level. But it's important to understand that that is that person's reality. And it doesn't have to be our reality. It doesn't have to be our truth. So through the vibrational revelations and the work we've been doing, it has taught us to be more humble, more compassionate, open-minded, and also recognize that we don't have the answers to everything. I don't think anyone does. But we can explore and navigate and share what we know. And perhaps through the collaboration of more questions and more ideas coming in, we can get to discover new things.
beautiful, guys.
Elena Alejandro, I wanted to ask you, with regards to the scalar technology, and I'd love to hear your feedback, but do you find that even with all these technologies that are coming up, that are surfacing right now, it's ultimately pointing to our innate technology that we have available within us? And as we raise our level of consciousness, individual as well as collectively, then we'll begin to unlock the inner knowings that exist within each and every one of us?
Definitely. We've said often that we are the device, you know.
We're the technology.
We are the technology. Yes, this didn't come from an unknown place. It came from the source from which we all come from.
The one thing I do want to share, because we've revealed so many different technologies on the market, and I'm glad you asked that question too, and that is, there are technologies right now that are being launched all over the world, but they are random number generators, okay? And those are artificial intelligence. And what we're finding is many tend to rely, again, on the external things, and they'll say, oh, you know, I just push a button and I'm being healed. But again, you're giving your power away to something external, and it is a random number generator. So this is a very different, there's very different technologies on the market. Some are truly artificial intelligence, and then there are those that require human aspect. And I think that human aspect can never be taken away, and we cannot fully rely just on the technology itself. We can't take the humanity out of it. So again, this is just like a cautious, I would say, advice.
Yeah, they serve as tools, and as you mentioned, that we tend to forget what we're capable of doing, or don't even try to investigate and to find out what is exactly that we're capable of doing. We use our time and energies into find the one who has the answer, that we think has the answer, and then instead of using that energy, focusing that energy and figuring it out what we are capable of doing, right? So that way, when we look outside, we often, because it's an easy way to fix things, we think that it's going to fix our situation. We're giving our power away, and then we create codependency. So we give more our power away, and then we focus less and less on trying to find out what we are capable of doing, right? So it is a tool, but we just have to pay attention of not get to the extent in which we're depending on it, right? Mm-hmm. So where we think that we rely fully on an external source, and then we forget of what we are capable of doing.
Yeah, and that's a fine line, I think, that hits sometimes. It really requires people to have to constantly kind of reflect and recheck back in to see, is it still here, or have I kind of put too much over there? What's the feeling like if I can't get access to it?
Or which aspect of yourself have you abandoned? Have you left behind? And can you check back in?
It's almost like a little bit of like the feeling of like addiction, where you don't think you're addicted to something, but okay, take the sugar out for a little while and see what happens when you don't have access to it for a bit, right? Like that's where you start to see what your relationship is actually like with these things. So I think it's all fascinating.
We're ending off these episodes for this series with questions, and I think Alejandro, you had touched on this already, but I wanted to ask both of you, in envisioning this new earth that we are individually and collectively cheering in, celebrating into our reality and within our existence. What are you seeing? What are you envisioning? What is in your heart of hearts? What is it that you desire and long for yourselves, for your family, for your community, for your children?
Mm-hmm.
You want me to go
Ladies first?
Well, for me, I'll say this, that my kids, they're older now, are, I would say, a beautiful example of what I feel the future of humanity is. They're just really good human beings. My desire for new earth, higher consciousness, to be more compassionate and to see beauty in all, because it is through seeing the beauty in all that you recognize your own beauty in yourself. And when you see the beauty through the eyes of compassion, this is where the consciousness of the collective is going to rise. So being a little kinder to your neighbors, to your friends, to yourself, having that inner dialogue with yourself is really key.
Mm-hmm. I would like for everyone to follow what resonates and to do their best to pay attention to the way they feel, because the feelings are their guidance system, and it's letting them know how aligned or how out of alignment they are. And just with that, we can definitely expedite the process of experience heaven on earth,
Thank you.
That has come up before too. That's an important one. It ties in with this idea of just connecting back to your own truth and then showing up from that place, connecting with it, less self-censoring of who we are and bringing more of our own selves into the world. Beautiful, guys.
In practicality, how does one begin that journey here today now? Like, are there certain practices or certain guidance that you can offer someone who can just start from today? Okay, I'm gonna do this every day in order to move towards that direction, or in order to manifest that which I truly long for.
Pay attention So everything you do, just be present. Even when you wash the dishes, when you do the laundry, be present.
For me, there is an exercise that I like.
And one more, if I may, be present. Do the things that you enjoy doing more often, right? And remind yourself of the moments going back in time, whatever it is you can collect of the joyful moments, right? Whatever it is that brings you joy in general. And just know that since every thought vibrates at a specific frequency, it activates or triggers a specific emotion that vibrates at a specific frequency. Just with thought, we can activate that frequency. And then by taking ourselves back, we're time traveling when we remind ourselves of what we did yesterday. If it is a joyful moment, we are re-experiencing it, and therefore we are reactivating that frequency. It's obviously a high frequency moment that brought you joy or peace or bliss. So I think it is easier to remind yourself of that which brought you joy and bathe in it and maybe take notes of the details of it, the most you can come up with, because the longer you bathe in it, the stronger the pool. You begin to create a snowball effect. You reinforce that which you want to experience. Therefore, you expedite the process of attracting alike, right? So it is easier then to sit down and try to create a new experience, especially when you're having a low moment. It's easier. I feel it's easier to remind yourself of that which you have already experienced, that whatever it is that brought you joy. Yes.
Beautiful. I can totally bask in what it is that you're speaking of. Thank you for that.
Oh, good.
You're welcome.
Yeah, for me, it's all about connecting to your inner child. And that inner child, it's an exercise that I do. I think I've done it naturally my whole life, but it is through connection to nature. So being out, walking, and just, as Alejandro said, being present in the moment and noticing. For me, it's always about noticing the beauty. Trees, grass, sky, birds, butterflies, flowers, whatever it might be. Feel the appreciation, see the beauty, and that also will enhance your vibrational frequency and help you stay in that moment a lot longer.
And lower the voice, or the volume of the voice of the outer world, and increase the volume of your inner voice.
Beautiful. And these are such simple practices. And I think oftentimes we as humans discredit.
Like to make it more difficult.
We want to make it more
harder.
complex and difficult, but they're so profound. They're so profound. Like we have implemented them within our lives, and I know it has completely shifted mine, done a 180 with my mindset and my field of view within how I operate within this world. So I highly encourage friends to check this out and test it out within your own life. And by seeing the beauty or looking for the joy and amplifying that frequency, it actually reminds me of what Paul Selig is also talking about, where you're inviting a higher frequency into your life, into your being, and into your world through your own vessel. And it's a powerful place to be. And it's a powerful way that we can even contribute to our collective world as we know it.
Yes.
Guys, thank you so much. Where can people learn more of the work that you guys are doing? Where can people go that they'll be able to get all of your stuff, including, I think maybe we'll have to get some of the links to the YouTube videos that we spoke about.
Yes.
That we can
sure. So our work is vibrationalrevelations.com. And then it's all under the umbrella of holistic.com, WHOLISTIC. This is where we're also actually taking people to Egypt in February. We have a few spots left for anyone who wants to come. And then Bosnia next year, people have requested for us to go back to Bosnia. We'll be doing that again next summer.
The advantage, very quickly, is that we measure the frequencies of the places that we're wanting to visit, and have removed couple of them that we didn't
Oh, on the
align with.
Egypt trip, yeah, because we
Doing
went
that.
and we're like, we're not
Yes,
taking people
okay.
there.
So we're doing the work for those that would like to visit Egypt. We're pretty much do the screening and weeding out the low vibrational frequency places, so they're not impacted by it as well.
Yes, especially for people who are uber sensitive.
Uh-huh.
For sure. Awesome.
Beautiful.
We'll have all of those links in the show notes so people can
Thank you.
check that stuff out. And then we'll have to touch base again in the future for
a follow-up and check in with you guys.
see what's going on.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you so much.
So much
Thank you
fun.
all
Thank
so
you.
much.